All right, welcome everybody to the second week of Breaking into Tech. So today we're featuring Zoe and I'll first introduce myself. My name is Tina. I'm currently a second year CS major and I'm the external vice president. And this series is really highlighting the importance of diversity in tech. As we know, there is a bit of a problem with diversity in tech. And so we really want to just kind of put the focus on why it's important and how we can um, increase diversity in tech. So today we have Zoe with us. So would you like to really quickly introduce yourself, your year, major, committee in tech, or committee in ACM, and what you do?
Yeah, hi guys, I'm Zoe. I'm a second year theater major studying design and production, specifically costume and scenic design. I am an officer for ACM Studio, and I'm one of the new officers this year. I've been recently helping out build our end of the year showcase, and I'm also on the Game Jam subcommittee. And yeah, that's kind of what I've mainly been doing since I've been elected.
Awesome, thank you. So for how this is going to work is you can all feel free to ask questions in the chat. I'll be moderating it and asking any questions that you all have to Zoe. So feel free to send it anytime you would like. But the main reason we wanted to start this series is because in ACM, it is technically a tech organization, but a majority of our officers are all CS majors or math majors. And so we really wanted to put the spotlight on some people who are like theater majors and see what different perspectives they can offer. I have a list of questions, but as always, feel free to send any in the chat and I'll get started with the first one. So how did you first become involved in ACM?
So I joined this school year. I found ACM through ACM Studio. I was looking for a game development club because it's something that I've been interested in since I was really young, but I haven't really been sort of active in pursuing until like the past year or so. And so I found ACM Studio and joined and started getting involved with them. And obviously, being a part of a larger committee, it kind of brought me in head first into the larger ACM, which was a bit of a shock. I came to make games and ended up as an officer for the biggest tech club on campus. So that's kind of how it happened, and it's all very recent still. And I'm excited to explore the others areas of ACM since I kind of began in a more creative area. It's more in line with what I do. But yeah.
That's awesome. So when you said you first kind of got into gaming a little bit and then you just started pursuing it more deeply, what was your kind of background into that? Were there any games that you played as a kid that really inspired you to pursue this path?
Yeah, I was so when I first started wanting to um do game development when I was a kid, I'd been playing a lot of World of Warcraft, like a lot. And I've always been a creative writer, so I had all these ideas for making my own sort of World of Warcraft style game, which being 10, I was convinced I could do by myself when obviously that's completely impossible. But yeah, and I grew up with a stepdad who is a computer science guy, so he's kind of encouraged that a little bit, and um lo and behold, I ended up wanting to pursue it further now that I'm an adult and making my own decisions. It turns out there's a lot of crossovers between what I already do and game development. And yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to delve a little bit deeper into what crossovers you've seen so far?
Yeah, so it's being on the sort of visual arts side of theater, being um, a design and production emphasis. There's a lot of crossovers with game design and with theater design, both in aesthetics, but also in sort of the modes of production, I guess you could say. In high school, I was um, the student technical director at my high school theater organization, and basically I had sort of a production manager type role, I guess it would be what you'd compare it to in this industry. Um, and so it's a lot of similar concepts organizationally, and also my artistic skills and eye for design that I use in theater is very helpful for games as well. And just I've also been getting into more interactive theater content, which in and itself is like essentially live video games. So yeah, there's honestly a lot more crossovers than people think, just because theater is a performance that you watch live and games is something that you interact with mostly virtually. Um, it doesn't mean that they're not really, really similar in how they are being produced and their approaches to ideas.
Yeah, for sure. That's really interesting to hear. We have a question from the chat. When you're making a game, have you ever noticed that you have any thoughts that are brought up where CS majors might say, "Oh, I would have never thought of that." So basically, like, is there any situation where you've kind of had a different perspective?
Um, I guess you could kind of say that. I just think there are some, again, going into the way that things are run in theater and the way that I've seen things being run in the way we approach game development in ACM Studio is very similar in ways that I think my experience with I'm leading a team just for reference right now for our big game project. And I think there's a lot of things that have come into that from my theater background that other people might not have thought of when it comes to like a leadership style, just because uh, I'm used to collaborating with other people. I think certain times other more not necessarily like just CS or but sometimes STEM majors tend to be used to the way that they work on projects. And with theater majors, there's no one way to work on a project. There's never any one way to collaborate with somebody, and it's always changing and always shifting in a way that can be a bit less, at least how I see it, straightforward than in some other STEM backgrounds, which obviously have a great deal of problem solving and a great deal of creativity in their own way. um, but I just think theater is so unstructured a lot of times in comparison to some other really technical fields, that the way that we approach collaboration needs to be um, cognizant of that. And so I think that has been interesting to see translate over in a way that is perhaps a bit different than how other people are used to working within the club.
Oh, got you. Yeah, because especially for CS majors, like working on group projects, it can be pretty difficult because a lot of people have different coding styles, and so it can be kind of hard to kind of merge everyone's ideas into one. So it's really interesting to hear about.
Yeah, that's it's so funny because that's so similar to how it is in theater, but I just think it is we are expected as theater makers to sort of not acquiesce to other people's ideas, but we have a director. So
Mm.
whenever our styles are maybe conflicting, there's always that one person who's there to be like, okay, I am the voice of reason here. I am the person who has the main ideas that we are collaborating on. And I feel like if you're doing a working with like different styles of code and working in a group project, there might not be that expectation um, that you're cooperating under one person's vision and all sort of contributing to that. Um, but it's so interesting how similar it is, like when we seem so different on the outside.
Yeah, yeah, I've definitely seen that before as like the infamous divide between like North Campus and South Campus, right? And we feel like we're so different, but really similar, surprisingly. Okay. Yeah, I'd love to learn more about like the project that you're leading right now in studio. So when you first came into studio, did you have any previous like technical background of any kind?
So I most of what I know about computer science, or what I knew about computer science and technology in general before coming into ACM, was through my stepdad, because he he works in computer science, specifically cybersecurity. And so he's kind of like our tech man around the house. And I've picked up a lot from him growing up in the past 10 to 12 years. But yeah, I actually, before entering ACM, I started teaching myself Unity. I teach myself things a lot. It's something that you kind of have to do as a technical theater person a lot because there's so few there's so few people who know about it as a field that in comparison to you can find tutorials for like everything STEM related online, or there's always a large group of people that you can go to ask questions about, I feel like. But with tech theater, it's a very small community. And so sometimes even in high school, it was really difficult to actually find people who knew how to do something. So you kind of just have to teach it to yourself and work as you go. And so I started applying those skills to teaching myself Unity last year. And that's pretty much I did some rudimentary coding with tutorial help, but that's pretty much the extent of the tech background that I had going into ACM.
Wow, it's very impressive to self-learn all of that because I feel like, yeah, as you said, there's like so many resources out there for a lot of CS things, but I would have never thought that um, it'd be so hard to find all those resources for theater. So I guess kind of going along those lines, what are some kind of struggles that you faced trying to work on this project? Anything that you learned or had to like self-learn during this time?
Yeah, I think honestly the biggest struggle that I've had, especially with leading the team, is that I don't have the struggle with not knowing enough about coding. I to really, I think, do my best job as a leader, which is something that I've been steadily improving on, even just from last quarter to this quarter. I've been kind of self-evaluating on that and realizing that um, as I've progressed further into this project, that I've been able to converse more on a and problem solve more with our programming team on within our team. On problems that they're having, because now I'm starting to understand the concepts, and now that I've done a little bit more coding myself, I'm starting to sort of understand how all the pieces fit together, and that's really helping me in my leadership style because that's I want to know what's going on with everybody, and that's how I'm used to going, is being able to jump in and help people. But when you don't know how to do something, it's really hard to help people problem solve. But that's something that has been really, really fun to sort of get used to through this experience.
Very neat. Let's see. And always feel free to send questions in the chat if you'll have any. I'll be moderating the chat as well. So do you feel like having this kind of two backgrounds of like, I guess, interacting with coding people and also with your stepdad who's computer science major or he works in computer science, do you feel like it's kind of helped you in any ways, like outside of ACM?
Yeah, it's so interesting because I feel like I have been interacting in some ways more with CS people than I have with theater people this year, just because um, especially in comparison to last year, which was my freshman year, which I had all of my theater majors for every single class almost because we have a freshman experience that we do. Um, so going from seeing all theater people pretty much 24/7 to mostly interacting with CS people as I've been getting more involved with this club has been very interesting, but I think it's giving me a lot of perspective on what I want to do in theater because as I mentioned before, I'm getting really into immersive and interactive theater, and now that I have more of a developed background in tech and in game development, I know how those solutions might be solved. And I know people who I can call on and build those relationships with who can help me solve those problems in the future. Yeah, and so it's really been just kind of blending it more and more together the more that I interact um, with STEM people. I'm learning so much from all of the CS majors in our club and all of the other majors in our club. We have some DESMA people, we have some math people, we have people from all over. And yeah, it's just really learning so much about what is possible. Um, and seeing how easy it is for CS majors to just solve a coding problem like that, like when I am like, oh my God, is this even possible? Can you do that? And they're like, yeah, we can fix that in like 5 minutes. And I'm like, oh, that's impressive. And so that's like, again, giving that perspective of knowing what everybody is doing and capable of helps me know like what is possible in my own work as well.
Awesome. And you also talked a little bit briefly about like interactive theater. Could you explain a little bit more about what that is?
Yeah, so it's actually been gaining popularity in recent years, sort of in spite of the pandemic, but also as a part of it, because people are now using Zoom and other technologies to facilitate an interactive process. But it's basically immersive theater and interactive theater are two things that kind of go together. Immersive theater is essentially engaging the senses and engaging the audience in for a sort of like 4D experience in a way that more than theater already is. For example, I went to a show on Broadway where, while not being completely immersive or interactive necessarily, I was sitting with my feet in the sand of, it was like an island setting. And so they were like cooking on stage, they were interacting with us. And yeah, and then, but interactive theater, how I see it, is essentially taking immersive theater and including more audience participation. So whether that's the audience having some sort of influence on the plot or simply interacting with the actors more, that's something that is becoming a lot more popular. A production company that I work with at UCLA recently did an interactive murder mystery around Halloween this year, and they did it on Zoom. And essentially, what they did is it was all immersive, and we were people witnessing this party going on where a murder took place, and they sent us into breakout rooms to make our case for who was the murderer. And the play ended with what we chose. And so there's also this, that's also what's been good about the pandemic with theater, is that we are getting used to using these different technologies to essentially make theater more like a video game. You get to choose what happens. And that's something that I am interested in pushing even farther, in ways that I basically would be like, how I see it as part theater, part LARPing, part video game.
That's super neat. I think the closest experience I've had with like immersive or yeah, more immersive theater is I think it was at some theme park. I was watching like a clip of Shrek and then they had like vibrating seats. And then at one point when he sneezed, it like shot water into our face. So that was a pleasant experience, but that was the closest like 4D experience I've had. But yeah, that's
Yeah,
pretty cool.
it's the same concept. It's and that would fall under entertainment design for, parks and stuff, which is also something that I'm interested in working with Walt Disney Imagineering, for example. That's something that they are getting a lot more interested in. They're having an immersive Star Wars hotel experience that's opening up next year at Disney World. And so it's becoming in a lot of industries a lot more popular, and I really am glad for it, because I've always been somebody interested in like an interdisciplinary approach and pushing those boundaries. And so I'm really glad that it's kind of coming about more popular at a time where I'm ready to enter into the industry myself.
That's awesome. Do you have any like particular dream place to work in the industry?
I honestly, I have so many interests. I would love to be a Imagineer for Disneyland. I'm we actually have a class, probably some of you have heard of it. It's technically called the Art and Process of Entertainment Design, but colloquially called the Imagineering class at UCLA. I'll be taking that next year, most likely if I can get in. It's a popular class. But yeah, and so I would love to work with them. I have some of my friends in design are helping or planning on doing their the Imagineering contest next time it opens up. It's not because of the pandemic right now, but basically you submit a proposal and then you can likely get an internship, and there's only 100 of them. So like they pretty much hire from the internship and the contest. So that's something that I'd love to do. Would be a great way to implement my theater design skills and my game dev skills, because they have those are two industries that, or two majors that they recruit from regularly. So but yeah, I'd love to do, if not that, work in the LA theater scene or at like an indie game dev company.
Very cool. For this type of jobs, like for example, Imagineering, well, I cannot pronounce that. Do you know if they recruit for like a specific type of major or not?
So Imagineering is very flexible. If you look at the list of such as like on their website with their contests in particular, they recruit from art majors, theater majors, game development majors, technology. There's so many opportunities. That's why I'm interested in something that's so interdisciplinary like that, because um, they need people who know how to animate, they need people who know how to code, they need people who are really great illustrators, they need people who know how to construct props and costumes, they need people with a great eye for design and content creation. They need all of those people to work on a lot of times a single project, and so they will take people from a lot of different backgrounds, and that's kind of an approach that I try to employ in my own work, is being willing to work with people of all different backgrounds and being able to jump into those myself and make myself a more well-rounded creator.
So then I've kind of encountered this conflict myself, honestly, because like I am technically a South Campus major, but I do have a lot of interests that fall in North Campus. Like for example, I love attending theater shows. I can't act for my life, but I like watching people do it. So when you kind of think about how you like merge all your interests, do you often find yourself like kind of at conflict with yourself, like, oh, I like all these things, but they seem like they come from completely different worlds?
All the time. All the time. It is a constant struggle to figure out how the pieces fit together, especially being somebody who sort of has a tendency to hyperfixate on several different things at once or one thing at a time, and sort of dip my toes in a lot of different areas. It is a constant struggle to figure out, what am I going to do with this? How am I going to merge everything that I'm interested in into one thing? And you don't have to. You can have hobbies, you can have multiple interests, but it's been really great um, talking to a lot of professionals in the theater industry in particular that I've gotten a chance to. That's kind of like helped ease my anxieties a little bit, because I've told them, oh yeah, I'm also interested in game development, and their eyes like light up and they're like, oh my God, that's so interesting. That'll be so helpful. Or, I'll be talking to, uh, we had a couple last year of costume concept designers come talk to us over Zoom, and I kind of realized, oh wait, these people work on video games. They work on theater and film, but they also work on video games because they're concept artists, but they're concept artists specifically for costume. And so it's just seeing those connections, seeing that other people have been making those connections either in their career or their personal life and hobbies, is incredibly validating and helps ease those anxieties, because then it helps boost my creativity as well. And I think, oh, well, there are ways that I can do this, this, and this. I just have to, carve my own path. And I've always been somebody who's been willing to do that, as much anxiety as it causes me. um, but yeah, it is a constant struggle, but it's also, I am the type of person who would kind of, perhaps not with my own best sanity in mind, but I would rather be that type of person who's constantly pursuing a bunch of different things. It's just how my brain functions.
It's very inspiring, very reassuring for me as well. I guess speaking of other hobbies, like what other things are you interested in outside of, I guess, like game development and also theater?
Yeah, people who are working on my, or are familiar in studio with the project I'm working on, will probably know that I'm really into comics. Um, my project that I'm working on is sort of inspired by superheroes and superhero comics in general. But yeah, so I'm very interested in comics. I read a lot of Marvel. I'm a Marvel girl. But I also read a lot of indie comics as well. I've been getting more into them in the past year or so. And I am interested in making comics as well. I just need to be a better writer and illustrator, as always. Always looking to be better and better at those things. And yeah, I write. I mentioned that. I'm the lead writer for my game project right now. I've written on a couple other ACM Studio projects as well. I've been writing a novel since I was like in 8th grade, but still haven't finished it yet. Um, yeah, I just kind of do things. I craft. I've always been a crafter. That's why I'm a tech theater person, because I've always been a crafter and a sewer. Um, I'm just always looking to make things and get my hands on things. I'm a very tactile person, so um, sewing, crafting, writing, drawing, all of that stuff is just, I need to be constantly doing something. And so I kind of have a lot of different hobbies in the creative side of things. Um, yeah.
How does the entire process work for like writing and creating a game?
Yeah, it's a bit interesting. It's been, since I originally started out as more of a prose writer, novelist sort of thing, it was interesting to adapt those skills to gaming and game development, because it's, you do really have to think about the big picture as well as all of the little things, in a way that you don't, I mean, you have to do that when writing a novel as well, but you have to think about the player's experience as well, which is different than the reader's experience, because the player is informing the choices of the story. It's like writing a choose your own adventure novel, which I did for a project in 7th grade, but on a smaller scale. But it's like, so it's like writing a choose your own adventure novel, but with a million other steps as well, because unless you're writing a visual novel, there's also going to be other gameplay elements as well. Writing a visual novel, you can approach it very similar to writing a choose your own adventure novel. You just also have to consider like the art and the UI and how that benefits the story. Most of the time you'll be working with other people on that, unless you're doing it all yourself. But if you're writing something that is not, that's maybe an RPG or even like a platformer or something like that, that does have some story elements as well, whether that's dialogue or just the story is being told through visuals, you kind of have to approach it from a different direction, because you have to consider all these other pieces. You can't just be like, this is the story. You have to be like, where is the gameplay mechanic fitting into this story, and how do they benefit from each other? And so it's a tricky thing to get right when you're starting out, as I am. I realize I just phrased that like I'm some sort of professional, which I am not. I am still a beginner in when it comes to these things, but that's just what I've learned while making the games that I've been working on. in Studio.
Wow, sounds like a difficult process. So in high school, I once took this class where we like analyzed films, and I remember my teacher said because she had taught it for so many years that she's basically an expert on like analyzing films. She says that now she's like ruined from watching movies because like she just can't help herself from analyzing it. So I'm just like wondering if there's like any positive or negative benefits you've gotten from like develop making a game yourself, and then like how has that affected you playing games now?
I think it has definitely widened my taste in games. I surprisingly am one of the like least. It's weird to say this, but I've realized that I'm one of the least like traditional gamery people in ACM Studio. In that, a lot of the games that other people play, I have not played. I kind of growing up stuck to like the same handful of games. Um, for years at a time, and I still sort of do, but definitely it is necessary to play a lot of different types of games to be a successful developer, because you know what's, again, the idea of what's possible has been something that I'm constantly expanding in my brain the more that I interact with people and the more games that I play. But I definitely feel like it has widened my taste. I have a newfound appreciation for visual novels and narrative storytelling in gaming, as well as for the types of games that I never really played growing up because I was bad at them. That is roguelikes and platformers. I am notoriously bad at. But I have found a newfound respect for what they can do besides frustrate me. And so that has been incredible because now it's gotten to the point where I'm like, oh my God, I'm actually interested in making these games, not let alone like playing them. um, because now I'm learning that there's so much that you can do with a sort of what people might see as a very traditional game format. There's so many ways that people have been able to expand it. I particularly like the game Gris, which I was introduced to through Studio. Um, it is a platformer, it is a puzzle platformer, and sometimes it really frustrated me being not very good with fine motor controls sometimes. But it is absolutely gorgeous, and it is an excellent example of beautiful writing with absolutely no text or dialogue. And so, yeah, I think just learn that has been the positive thing, I guess you could say. Um, Negative is now I feel like it's negative and positive. I have more respect for the bugs that I encounter in playing games because I realize how hard it is to break the like to get around that kind of stuff and to actually make the mechanics in general. But at the same time, it also sometimes when I encounter things that frustrate me in a game, I'm like, why couldn't you just do this? Now that I know, like, okay, there are other solutions you can find. So that's kind of a positive and negative, just depending on the situation.
So if you ever play games, you could just be like, oh, this is for research purposes. So little excuse
Literally,
for you.
yeah. That's how I think of it now.
Nice, nice.
It's how
Do
I
you
justify spending tons of money on games.
oh, for sure. Do you have any games you'd recommend to anyone? I know that's a big question to ask, but any top games?
I would definitely recommend Gris, especially if you like platformers, but you'd like to branch into narrative gaming. It's not, it's like both. It's just so gorgeous. The music and the art just tell like a story, a very beautiful. Yes, Athena, I know you like it, you're commenting. Um, it's just so gorgeous, and again, really expanded my mind to like what is possible with a puzzle game, with a platformer. Um, I know I'm gonna sound like Emily right now when I suggest Night in the Woods. She introduced me to that game. It is absolutely gorgeous. It's kind of scary. It scared me. I played it at night. There were some jump scares, but it is a really incredible story that I love. Um, yeah, I think those were probably the ones that I would recommend right now that I have finished. I'm currently trying to get through a few others that have been recommended to me through ACM Studio, such as Outer Wilds. I'm like probably halfway through it right now. Absolutely obsessed. Love time loops. If I also, however, it's really difficult for me to play because it's first person, and I get motion sickness. So yeah, I would recommend that, especially if you do like exploration games, um, and first person things, I guess. Yeah, mostly I just played Dragon Age, but like everybody knows that. Everybody knows that game. And it's not like, I wouldn't say it's like the best game there is ever. I just have been playing it for several years now and like can't stop. I like, it's a hyperfixation. Um but yeah, those other ones are ones that I would, yes, Peter, good old BioWare classic. Um yeah, those are my recommendations that I've been kind of introduced to recently.
I'll be sure to check them out. Yeah. So I know you talked about like immersive interactive theater, which is like going in a really interesting direction. So do you think that gaming is going in a cool direction? And if so, like what are you most excited about?
I hope so. Am really, I love the community of indie developers that have been sort of flourishing, especially during the pandemic, I feel like, in some ways. I feel like now, as opposed to 10 years ago, there's just so many more opportunities for people to make games. Like, it's so easy to learn Unity. Like, it's so easy. There's so many tutorials out there. Um, and itch.io lets people publish games. Even if they're, they don't have to go through any sort of review process, so even if it's like a really crappy game, you can still publish it and get feedback on it. And so I really love that the indie game development community has been growing, and that I hope it continues to grow, because there's a lot of things going on right now in the sort of corporate AAA game world that have been not so thrilling for people like me who are prefer to be like a single player narrative experience. I feel like a lot of companies, cough EA, cough, are pushing more and more for multiplayer stuff and like online multiplayer stuff, with especially with the success of like Fortnite and everything, which, not that those games aren't fun, they're just like not the games that I prefer to play. I prefer to play by myself a lot of times, sort of immersed in story. And yeah, I'm hoping that the influence of indie gamers, especially indie gamers who make more narrative content and more, not just narrative content, but artistic and evocative, um, and all of that good stuff, really push more mainstream games. I'm hoping that happens. I have developed through making games a newfound love for 2D games and how beautiful the art can be, and just how and that's it's a lot of the 2D games that I find that are beautiful and fantastic to play are indie games. Simply because I'm not just because they're easy to it's easier to make 2D art than 3D art a lot of the times. Um but because I feel like the perspective on games as art is a bit more like, it's like more indie developers, from what I've seen, tend to view their games as art and as pieces of art that they want to show off, not just games that'll make them money. And so I'm really hoping that those influences start to shine over a little bit more into um like mainstream gaming, so it's kind of starts to loop back to like what it maybe perhaps used to be.
Oh, very cool. And then kind of talking about I guess like the direction of where games are going. So you talk about like 2D art and like some 3D art. So how do you feel about like wait, what is it called? VR and AR? Like how do you feel about those in like the game industry?
I have not played much VR, again, motion sickness. I think it's great. I think it's as a conceptually, I think it's pretty awesome. Again, kind of fits into like immersive interactive theater sort of thing. I love an immersive gaming experience. I love an immersive theater experience. So VR as a concept is really thrilling to me. I just get motion sickness, so I don't really play them a lot. Um, as for augmented reality, that's actually interesting that you ask that because at TFT we are doing, we've been trying to work on it since before the pandemic, but I think we're finally going to be putting it up this fall. In AR live theater experience based on Man in the High Castle. Um, I'm not involved with that production yet. I'm hoping that I'll get assigned to it next fall, but I'm because it is really interesting. The idea, from what I remember, at least when it was in its early stages before the pandemic, was that it's a theater experience which also incorporates augmented reality. So the audience will have their phones and be able to, essentially the props will be painted and built in such a way that they will scan on and appear on the phone as something different, or as their digital form. And so it's like really a really cool way to, I think AR is a really cool tool for merging games and theater and tech and theater in general. And I think, yeah, I think AR is great. And VR is, they're both great. And I would like to get more involved with them just for what they mean for my interests.
Sounds awesome. And then we have another question outside of game development. Are there any other avenues of tech that you have explored?
So, besides, I actually do work with some tech in theater. I used to do a bit more in high school when I was I was a sound person, a soundboard operator for my high school theater department. I operated the sound and lighting boards. I kind of learned how to do that. So it was frustrating, especially because, again, I had to teach it to myself. But I do have an interest in getting more involved with sound design and sound mixing, which is and just more like audiovisual type tech in general. Again, it helps me with the things that I do in theater, but is also a really great tool for game development as well, particularly sound mixing. It is an incredibly daunting field to me, but it is something that I feel like I should learn. Um, it makes you incredibly marketable. Sound mixer will always get a job in some in some field. Um, but yeah, and I think I'm also interested in kind of seeing what the rest of ACM has to offer. I haven't really dipped my toes too much yet in the other committees. Um, but I'm interested in learning more about coding, maybe learning more about AI, because I know a lot of people in studio have made use of what they've learned in ACM AI for our various games. And yeah, I kind of just, I like to learn things, so I'm up down for whatever.
And when you were self-learning a lot of these skills, did you ever encounter some obstacles?
Again, always, there's always obstacles when you're teaching yourself something. The story I usually like to tell is my sophomore year of high school. It was my first day. The day I got assigned to do the lights for a dance show, and the day before, there was no time for the previous lighting technician to train me, and he was busy that day, which is why I was hired. um and so basically, the night before I had my first rehearsal, where I was supposed to program the lighting board, I read the manual. I found the manual online. I had memorized which model of lighting board that we had at the theater, which was an pretty old model, but I found the manual online and read the relevant sections and then jumped right into it the next day. So that definitely is an obstacle when you kind of have the resources and you know about it conceptually, what works, but once you actually start doing it, it's a whole different process. And so it's really important to learn by doing as much as possible. And as stressful as that is, it's really, especially for somebody who's as tactile as me, getting my hands on it and actually teaching myself how to do it and failing at it is the only way that I can learn sometimes.
Yeah. And then kind of going off of that, what advice would you give someone else who might be trying to like learn more about tech or like might want to join ACM as well?
I'd say just jump into it. I mean, it's a cliche, but and it's also sort of contrary to a lot of my philosophy as somebody who hates getting that advice because I am very anxious a lot of times. But honestly, it's what I did and it ended up working out in my favor. I think my biggest fear going into ACM was that I'd be the only North Campus person there, which I quickly found out was not true, especially in studio. Um, and yeah, and I was just worried that I'd be judged and worried that people would be mean and they expect too much of me, but that's not the case at all. I think we are a very friendly club. Um, so as for joining the club, that's definitely something that would ease prospective members. But as for jumping into tech in general, as somebody who doesn't do tech, finding people who do that and making friends with them is really essential. That way, if you run into a problem, you're not pulling your hairs out trying to locate a tutorial about it online. I have been through that. As we discussed, there's not a lot of technical theater sort of things. There's a few forums online where you can get questions answered, but really having somebody to take you through the steps or answer a question for you is sort of essential if you are learning something that you never have before. I've definitely asked a lot of questions of people in studio when I need help with things or I'm unsure about what's going on. And just having people be patient with you is really helpful as well, which I know sometimes is not something we can control as people to make people be patient with us. But just trusting that they will be patient with you is sometimes necessary and not being afraid to admit that you don't know how to do something. Because you're never gonna figure out how to do something if you like don't admit that you already don't know how to do it. And that's something that I have struggled with a lot because I tend to hold myself to very high standards. But that's how I found Studio. I tried to make a game all by myself, realized that that's not how things work when you don't know how to code, and joined Studio. And now I'm learning from the ground up and sort of learning from other people, and it's really benefiting me.
That's super great to hear. Do you have a favorite experience or memory from your time at studio?
I've only been here less than a year, and there have been so many great moments. I'm honestly mostly just glad that I like have friends now. Like I know that's like really sad to say. Um, but yeah, I've always been somebody who's struggled socially, so I think just being welcomed, it's not a specific memory, but just the feeling of being welcomed and like respected and like invited to things even outside of the club or like is just that's what makes it a really enjoyable experience, and that's why I applied to be an officer, is because I this has in just a few months become really important to me, and the people here have become important to me as well. um and like I'm immensely grateful to them for just listening to me complain about not knowing how to code and letting me in on when they're hanging out or playing Dungeons and Dragons. Like that's I have friends now and it's nice.
It's very wholesome. Oh, what do you all do for socials, by the way, other than playing Dungeons and Dragons?
We do okay, so we do Emily is usually the one who plans our like actual official club socials. We do a lot of like Kahoots and Jeopardy, trivia about things going on in game development or games or like in the club itself. We're very active on Discord. We post a lot of memes to each other, always talking about like um new games that are coming out or funny gaming memes. Funny, I'm like learning all people post a lot of like funny math and like computer science memes, and so like I'm learning through that as well, like what frustrates STEM people versus what frustrates theater people is kind of fun. Yeah. Oh, also we kind of just sometimes we kind of just hang out in voice chat and play games. Like people do that a lot in studio, is just like shoot a message, say, hey, I'm gonna be streaming this. Anybody want to like watch me and chat?
Oh, that's awesome.
I guess we really do one thing, and that's play games and make games.
That's a vibe. I love that. All right. Yeah, feel free to send any last questions you all want into the chat. Otherwise, let's see. Is there anything else that you wanted to talk about, maybe that we didn't get to, that you think would be important to share with everyone?
I don't know. I guess we kind of covered most of it. But just for people, because I know that there's some people of various academic backgrounds in this call. If you want to learn something, like this is gonna be my soapbox, like inspirational moment. Like if you want to learn something, just learn it. Like and it will benefit you even if you don't think it is. Just branching out will help. We've actually been kind of running with this concept in studio, and we're kind of throwing around the idea of doing a game jam over the summer where we switch roles. So like I would be coding and somebody else who normally codes would be writing or drawing the art. But yeah, just like I see my presidents cheering for that idea. Yes. If you want to try something new, an environment like this is a really good place to try it, because you're not going to get graded on it. Like nobody's going to be mad if you suck at it. And just be willing to fail and be willing to produce something that is not that great, because that's how you learn. And that's really hard for people like me who are perfectionists to come to terms with, but it really is like essential to what we do in any field, whether it's creative or technical or, you know, anything else that we have not covered. You have to be willing to fail and be willing to let people see you fail, which is the hardest part for me. I don't like letting people see me fail, but letting people see me fail helps me learn and it helps them learn. So at least I feel like I'm doing a service to people by failing.
Very wise words. That sounds like a really interesting summer thing. I think I would be terrified to do that if I were in your position, but I think that'd be a really cool experience.
Yeah, I'm just gonna be watching tutorials for like 3 days straight. It's gonna be great.
Just Stack Overflow all of it. That sounds awesome. Okay. Any last questions in the chat? Otherwise, we might start wrapping it up a little bit, but feel free to plug any upcoming events, projects that you will be a part of.
Yes, okay. If you are interested, come to our ACM Studio showcase week 9. Yes, follow at acmstudio.ucla. Please. That is our newly created Instagram account. It'll have information about our showcase and also jams that we're doing. We just documented Ludum Dare 48 that we just did recently. There's content about there on that. Yeah, and come to our showcase if you want. Get to see the games that we've been making for the past 2 quarters, as well as a couple of our Ludum Dare games. We are incredibly proud of the work that we've been doing this year, and would like to show it off to as many people as possible to come and play our games. If you are interested in theater, I am designing a show right now. It is Emma, based on the Jane Austen novel. I'm doing the set design. That will be probably finals week. If anybody's interested in that, contact me and I can get you the information, or probably be on my Instagram. If you follow me on Instagram, guess I can put
Drop
my
the
Instagram.
handle.
Yeah. Yeah, but that's what I'm doing right now, and so that's what I've got to plug.
Oh, sounds amazing. All right. Well, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure listening to all of your advice, wise words, wisdom, everything, all that. It's been lovely to have you, and thank you for coming, everyone who showed up. Yeah, I think we're going to call it, but thank you, everybody.
Thank you
Great
guys
Go
for
rest.
inviting
Zoe!
me.
Go
And thank you for all
Zoe!
the wonderful questions. This was really fun.